On this episode of Locked On Lightning, can the Bolts survive Game 6 and send it back up to Toronto? We talk about all that and more, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today, we are discussing, obviously, the only thing that needs to be discussed right now and ask the question as well as answer it. Can the Lightning extend this series at least one more game, drive the series back up to Toronto, so we could utter the two greatest words in hockey and really all in sports, Game 7. But first, the Lightning have to win tonight at home, and they're coming off, obviously, a very phenomenal win in Game 5, 4-2, a game in which really we finally saw the Lightning put it all together. We've been looking at the entire series, and we've been seeing it for the most part. And really, I think that's what's been the most frustrating thing, has been that the Lightning, for the most part, except inside really the 10-minute mark of the third period, the Lightning have been the better team. And that's the frustrating thing, I think that. And that's the thing that I think on the other side of things that Maple Leaf fans have been the most nervous about. That this Lightning team, I mean, they know at the end of the day that the Lightning are better. They know that the Lightning, during the regular season, that's it. That is what it is. In the grand scheme of things, those games do not count. Anything that has been done during the regular season no longer counts towards what we are talking about today. But because when we look at this and we look at what the Maple Leafs have done the last, or really have not done the last 20 years, as opposed to what the Lightning have done over the last 3, obviously Maple Leaf fans are worried about this. And it's funny how, the difference between the two fan bases, how Lightning fans, we were kind of just more so, let's just play well the next game. Let's just win, chip away. That's all we need to do. Where even up 3-1, you see online, you see on Twitter, you see on Instagram, YouTube, Maple Leaf fans everywhere, for the most part, they're going to come back and win because that's all they know. And I think that a large part of it obviously has to do with the fact that if you look at the first 5 games in this series, other than Game 2, the Lightning have been the better team. If they just play a complete game in 4 and 5, 3 and 4, then this series the other night is 3-1 Lightning. But obviously that's not the case. But like I said, in Game 5, the Lightning finally put it all together. You kind of saw the polished product. And we were talking about that in the later stages, the last couple of weeks of the regular season, and about how the Lightning were just trying to polish off their game. They were trying to get into that mindset, that flow that is playoff hockey. And a lot of it has to do, I think, with just tweaking things here and there. If you've been a listener of this show for a very long time, even just this season, one of the things I always talk about with this Lightning team is that they're one of the best teams in the league when they just do the little things. And I think that is something that you didn't really hear a lot of in when you heard from other outlets about what the Lightning weren't doing well. And all credit to the Toronto Maple Leafs in those games in 3 and 4. They played well. They rose to the occasion. They were rushing the Lightning. They were what has been the main word to describe this pretty much this series for the Maple Leafs is they haven't been the better team for the most part, but where they have had the leg up on the Lightning has really been when they have been surging late in these games, and that is really what has been really the difference maker in this series up until Game 5. And we saw them surge in the third period, and the Lightning did a very good job. I kind of thought in Game 5 that once they made it 3-2, that I think a lot of Lightning fans, and I think you saw it from the Toronto fans at Scotiabank, that here we go again. They're gonna come back and win. And obviously that wasn't the case. The Lightning were able to hold them off, and I really think that's going to be the key for the rest of the series. Whether they're able to do it tonight and then extend the series to to 7. Um, for the duration of this series, really, I think what it's going to be for both teams when we look at the keys to the game, when we look, is that we kind of already know in a way, unless the wheels completely fall off in the opening minutes of this game. I think that everybody will be looking at the third period as the most crucial part, not for the Maple Leafs, but for the Lightning. Because, like I said, the Maple Leafs have been the better team for the most part in the third period. That has led them to 2 wins. And in this series, where really I think that if the Lightning just play a full game, we're talking about the scenario being flip flop. But I think that the Lightning really need to do basically everything that they did in Game 5. I think that as long as they do that on the defensive side of things, the scoring will come. And I feel like that's been the most uh that's been the most frustrating part of not only this series for the Lightning, but for the whole season, and has constantly been the talk for the Lightning all season, is that we know the scoring is there. And yeah, the some of the faces and names might have been different to start the season on opening night, but you always know with this Lightning team that very few times are there going to be times where they're not going to be able to score. So on any given night, barring some just incredible goaltending, especially tonight from Ilya Samsonov for the Toronto Maple Leafs, you're going to see scoring from this team. I think there was no doubt in anyone's mind that the Lightning were going to score. I mean, you look at the numbers for Samsonov in this series, he is almost ranked last in every category. So it hasn't been the goaltending for the Maple Leafs that has been the difference maker in this series. It has just been the Lightning not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that tells you just why everybody is worried on the Toronto side of things. And I think that all coupled, as long as the Lightning play their game, the game that we saw them extend the series in Game 5, and were able to bring it back home, I think at the end of the day, you're gonna have to take your chances with Samsonov. Yeah, he doesn't have that much experience in the playoffs. He's played well, just well enough to edge out wins for his team. But like we said, at the end of the day, he hasn't been that great compared to everybody else in the playoffs. So I think there's that as well. I mean, the Lightning, when you really break down this whole game and you break down the keys to for the Lightning in Game 6 tonight, it really comes down to just doing the same thing over and over again for the Lightning. Just replicating. I mean, the recipe for extending the series one more game is very simple for the Lightning. Score goals, which are going to come, and play defense. And I would expect also, the other question I think we could ask ourselves going into tonight's game, because nothing is guaranteed, as we all know, as we've seen from this season. And I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just pointing out all the positives and negatives. Is the one thing that we have noticed throughout this whole series, as well as the regular season, the issue has been Andrei Vasilevskiy. Okay, I think we've made peace with it at this point. All is forgiven as long as you continue, as long as we see more performances that like the one we saw in Game 5. We finally saw the $9 million goaltender I was complaining about it myself going into Game 5 that yeah, the expectations are always high for Vasilevskiy, but it's not like these expectations we just made up. This is things that we have seen him do over and over again, and that's why he's getting paid the amount of money. Andrei Vasilevskiy does, and let me be very clear. Andrei Vasilevskiy doesn't get paid to win games in the regular season. I mean, yeah, in theory he does. That's his job. But at the end of the day, he's not making the big bucks to win 40 games and then fall flat in the playoffs. He is making the big bucks to at least just be effective enough for the Lightning to get into the playoffs and then completely go crazy in the playoffs. That's 100% the reason why. I've seen some comments on the last couple of YouTube videos about how Andrei Vasilevskiy, and I've heard from other media outlets as well, kind of making this argument. Vasilevskiy is not to blame for some of the tip-ins. Absolutely. I mean, there's very few goaltenders, if any, on this planet that could stop some of the world-class tip-ins that we have saw in this series from Toronto. And obviously now we all know what the game plan is. As long as, the Lightning clear up the traffic in front of Bazzi, we have seen in years past that he is able to make those saves. So that's why it's that much more frustrating, at least for me. I don't know how you feel, Lightning fans, comment below. But I think that to a certain degree, we can get on him for that stuff. But like I said, all is forgiven. Game 5 was the best game he has played all year. And nothing is guaranteed. I would expect him to come with the same intensity tonight. I would expect that this Lightning team doesn't stray from any sort of play or strategy that they had in Game 5. So really, the phrase or the mantra that the Lightning should have going into this game is do not change anything. Just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll be talking about a Game 7 Monday night in Toronto. So we'll talk about more about tonight's game. Who do we expect to perform? Who do we need to perform? As well as, what kind of game are we going to see? We'll talk about all that and more. But first, I want to talk about our sponsors for today's show, and that is our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, if you haven't heard about eBay Motors, well, listen, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you could be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to the My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. When you shop on eBay Motors and with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay's guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. So once again, thank you for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Hit that thumbs up button under this video and leave a comment below, as well as go follow us on our social media pages at @LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. Follow me on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYDANK. And we are also available wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. And the best part about that is that we are free. So tonight is I would like to say that there's really no pressure on Tampa Bay. They've won 2 cups over the last 3 years. They are basically playing with house money. It's a very weird experience or mindset or whatever you want to call it. A very unique situation that the Tampa Bay Lightning are in, given all their past or their actually really their most recent success. And I think that really plays in their favor. I think now that you got Game 5 out of the way, I think there would have been a little bit noise of criticism, at least from pundits on the Tampa side. in terms of this series ending in 5. I think a lot of people would have been almost shocked if this series would have ended in 5 games. I would have 100% been shocked. As you know, from the get-go, I expected this series to go 7 games, nothing less. And you see it. And we've been talking about it. We just spoke about it, how really at the end of the day, I mean, in layman's terms, everything we spoke about, how like the Lightning have been the better team. At the end of the day, I think, even though the standings, and I said before, anything you did during the regular season doesn't really count now, other than the fact that the Maple Leafs statistically in the standings were the better team, so they will get home ice advantage for game 7. But as we all know, home ice in this series does not count. Up until this point, the home team is 1-4, so really doesn't matter. But I think that the Lightning, especially for a team like them, they are experienced, and we did see in Game 5, some younger players really starting to mold into those roles, and I spoke about that in this series, and I think even after when the Lightning went down 2-1, that the positives, or actually when they went down 3-1, I spoke about how the one positive at least Lightning fans could bring or discuss afterwards, if the Lightning were to lose game 5, was the fact that your young players, your Nick Pervikses, your Taylor Radishes, your Mikey Esamons, your Tanner Janots, those guys were going to get that experience that they needed. And that really, really, especially if they play well, that's going to propel them in their growth a lot faster than you would maybe see from players who are young, still developing their game, and don't go to the playoffs. And classic example, the year after was Ross Colton, scored that, only played 9 games during the shortened season, goes into the playoffs, scores a huge goal in the Stanley Cup final that wins them game 5. And then he has very impressive season in his, I guess almost we could really not call it his sophomore campaign, because like I said, he only played 9 games his rookie year. But yeah, he's had a little bit of a backslide since then, and I think everybody does. But that's a classic example. And that's the kind of thing where next year, especially with all the discussion and critique around the Lightning's moves over the last year or so, and with some of the names that we may not have next year, it is so important for these guys, these young guys, to get that burn. And I'm really happy, and it might be a little frustrating at the end of the day that Tanner Jeannot is sitting out and Mike Yesimont's in. But let's be honest, with the very low sample size that we have seen from Mike Yesimont, can't we all agree that not once in any of the ice time since he was acquired this season, and now in the playoffs, scoring a big goal the other night, and I know in the scorecard it wasn't the game-winning goal, but in my book it was a game-winning goal. It really propelled the Lightning forward, because I think if after I really think that if the Maple Leafs took the 2-1 lead instead of the Lightning, I think that does change things for the Lightning down the stretch. They play with a little, they play with a little bit more urgency. I think that it's different. They were playing with urgency early on, but at the same time, it was a different kind. It wasn't desperation. It was just urgency, more pep in their step, more energy. That's different than, the kind of urgency we saw later in the game from Toronto, where it's kind of the roles reversed, because you saw it earlier all throughout this year, Lightning going down early in games and then just kind of taking almost pretty much the entire game to get things going, and then you start to see that surge from them in the third period. But the roles have been reversed, and I really truly believe that without the Esamon goal, and you start to see now, especially with the Esamon goal, that they're starting to get those lucky bounces and those weird shot angles in. A guy like that, I mean, a guy who is willing to take that kind of shot with that skill, with that little bit speed in his game. That's the kind of thing that wins you championships. I spoke about it on the last episode that, or even the previous one, that Esamont really reminds me of kind of like an undeveloped Barclay Goodrow, and I kind of went I contradicted that on a tweet. I believe it was during the game or maybe prior, that Esamont kind of reminds me, just with his game, a guy who is, let's face it, never going to play above the third line unless he completely goes, he catapults himself to a whole nother level. A guy that you kind of look at right now who kind of reminds you a lot of Yanni Gord. And I know that's like a far-fetched kind of observation, but look at what he does when he's on the ice for this team. And I like I said earlier in the show, don't change anything. I firmly believe Esamont's going to be in the in the lineup tonight. I wouldn't see no reason as to why not. I would think Cooper would be he would be a dummy. No disrespect to him, but that would be a really dumb decision and a careless decision not to play the guy, especially who scored a big goal for you in game 5, in a game in which you there was no ifs, ands, or buts. You had it to win this game. And I think that's what tonight's game 6, is really we're gonna have to see from this team again. We're obviously gonna, or I actually really wish to see production from guys like Stamkos, Kucherov, Hedman, Point, Killorn, those kind of guys. But this game, I firmly believe, is going to be won by guys like Hagel, like Esamont, like even like Nick Paul, Anthony Cirelli, who scored a goal the other night too, who technically got the game winner. Those guys are going to be the guys that win you the game. And we've seen that every single year. Lightning fans should not be really surprised by this observation that, in the playoff games are won by great goaltending and great depth. So wrapping things up on the show, if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. So subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up underneath this video, as well as comment below. And yeah, this is, like I said, and I know I was a little bit all over the place tonight with this episode in terms of observations, but it's been that kind of series for the Lightning. There's so many moving parts, we could only fit so much in the span of a 30-minute show, but I could probably sit here and talk for an hour about all the things that could go on or that go into tonight's game against Toronto. And the Lightning are in a very good position. And we kind of saw that from the beginning of the series, and obviously deservingly so, that the Maple Leafs fans were super nervous. They just wanted to get this series done as soon as possible. And I even said it on the national show. I said it on the crossovers with Casey Hudson from the Pucks and Bolts podcast. I said it with Gil Martin on the Monday slot of Locked On NHL as well. And, like I said, my Thursday slot that I co-host with Chris Masilli. The longer that Toronto keeps Tampa in the series, the more difficult it's going to be to close out. And because Tampa Bay, one of the best teams at adjusting in the playoffs, one of the best teams in terms of learning in the playoffs. And that's all because of the veteran leadership. That's all because of the coaching from John Cooper, who, yes, I have criticized immensely throughout this season. But at the end of the day, you kind of knew, Cooper hasn't won close to 100 playoff games and 2 Stanley Cups and been to 4 because he's just guessing. It's because he's a great coach. But so you have a good combination, and what better team to be down and be able to have that confidence in them fighting back than Tampa Bay. So like I said in the last segment, playoff games are going to be won by depth, and they're going to be won by goaltending, great goaltending. And like I said on the previous episode, that in order for the Lightning, as well defensively, as well as Andrei Vasilevskiy, to be successful, they're going to have to rely on each other. It's a give and take relationship. One can't succeed without the other. Andrei Vasilevskiy, the only reason it looks like he's standing on his head in years past is because he's had great defense in front of him. Obviously, the Lightning, as pretty much has been the case for the entire series, going to be out, are going to be without Eric Chernak tonight. And if they extend this series to 7, it would be a shot in the dark if we see him on Monday. Like I said, I think just seeing the initial hit from Bunting, I just think it's a concussion. It has to be. There's no other reason unless it's a neck injury, which I feel like if it was, um, we might have heard something different in terms of his status, him really being out for the rest of the playoffs instead of out tonight, kind of a day-to-day situation. That's kind of the thing you sort of hear more often when it comes to head injuries and slash concussions. So, but I thought that Taylor Radish, I thought that Nick Pervix played phenomenal the other night, and I would expect more of the same tonight. Sergachev kind of worried me the last game. I thought that he has been, I guess, decent. I wouldn't say he's been great. I mean, he's been decent throughout the course of the series. I just think there's been certain moments, especially in the last game, where he's kind of looked a little shaky at the point, handling the puck. As we all know, in years past, his biggest issue has been turning over the puck at the blue line, which leads to odd man chances down the other side. So really, he is going to have to be perfect, as well as the whole defensive core is going to have to be perfect tonight. And of course, the big thing that follows with that, with playing good defense, and this doesn't just go for the defensive combos, it goes for all the skaters. Stay out of the penalty box, because the one thing you cannot do is give this Maple Leafs team, this very good Maple Leafs team who has a ton of people who could score and hurt you on any play, on any sequence, is power plays, odd man advantages. And if you look at the numbers, I don't really have them in front of me, but I mean, just off the eye test, that the Tampa Bay Lightning have been the better team on the 5-on-5 situation. So really, you're going to have to do that. The only thing, and one last thing, the only thing that, and I know I've been saying this throughout the course of the episode, but the only thing that I think that the Lightning do need to change, like I've said, don't change the thing, is I would prefer to see them go into the zone and cycle the puck. We kind of saw it later in Game 5 that the Maple Leafs were doing a very kind of figure if something's working, you kind of just stick to it, especially if it's on the defensive side of things. But the Maple Leafs, and this also goes hand in hand with the Lightning kind of not being willing to change the flow of their offense. But we saw way too many rush chances just be stood up at the blue line. And I think that doesn't really fall on the players per se. I think that really falls on the coaching staff. I really think that there needs to be at some point, especially if it's after a couple of failed rushes into the zone, that really what you need to do is just, John Cooper just needs to look at his guys on the bench and say, hey, shake things up, dump it, set up, cycle the puck, and look for the open shot. I don't think that the Maple Leafs have done a phenomenal job of blocking shots. They've had their moments where they've been very good of clogging the shooting lanes. But this isn't a Maple Leafs team that is spectacular. This isn't a shutdown team. The Maple Leafs aren't, in my opinion, they're not a team that I think is like particularly good on the defensive side of things. I think it's just been one of those situations where, and you look at, like I said, you look at Samsonov's numbers. It's not like he's Patrick Waugh right now, or he's ranked almost practically last in every category, almost with all the goaltenders in the playoffs. So I'm not particularly worried with the offense, but I still think that you need to change things up. You need to evolve as the game progresses, and everything else keep the same. As long as the Lightning are solid on the defensive side of things, like I said, and kind of like what we all kind of expect from this Lightning team. As long as the Lightning play defense, the offense will come. It's just they're just too talented to not score goals. So I would expect somewhat of a similar result tonight. 4-2 win at Amalie. The series goes back to Toronto, and we'll be back here on Monday talking about that. And if not, we'll be talking about, all the things from this game and just the disappointment surrounding that outcome, which, like I said, I don't think that will happen. I think this is going back to Toronto. I think we'll be back on Monday talking about how the Lightning are on the verge of one of the best comebacks that we have seen in the last couple of years. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Head of Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.